Hey, Bristol.
Hey, Libby.
This is Top of Stack in under 20 minutes. Let's do this. First up, hot events and awards.
So we were both just out in Vegas, and at the time there was FinTech Meetup and HumanX going on. Libby, why don't you tell a little bit about what you saw when you were there?
Yeah, I saw a lot of excitement about both conferences. Very, very different format, but both organized by lead event organizers that are really killing the game. This was HumanX's first year. They did a really excellent job of getting top quality reporters to come to the conference. It's much more content heavy, whereas FinTech Meetup, you can tell by the name, much more focused on these like 50-minute, 15-minute almost like speed dating setup where you can meet investors, you can meet startups, you can meet marketers, you can meet, anyone you want to try and advance your business objectives. Generally, I have found that people see a lot of immediate value in FinTech Meetup just because of the way the meeting setup is. But in terms of caliber and clout, people were really, really excited about HumanX this year. What'd you hear, Bristol?
Yeah, I would agree pretty similarly. I think FinTech Meetup, you leave and you're like, I made X number of connections, and a lot of that is done really easily through those networking sessions. I also think they've actually leveled up their content. Like I think last year it was much more limited, and this year there was an increasing number of different stages and different sessions that were going on. And I know we had even more clients that were speaking than we did last year, which was great. Um, and I think HumanX really did like jump out of the gate pretty fast. I know they hired a bunch of people from uh, Web Summit. So like the producer that I've worked with at Web Summit for years was starting content at HumanX this year. So like it was very experienced, like folks that know how to put on a good show. So I think folks were pretty excited. Some crazy people tried to do both, and then I heard there was another conference, Merchant X, and some people tried to
Yeah.
do three at once, which I give them a lot of props because I could not do that.
It was a busy week in Vegas, and then we hopped back to Miami, where Bristol is based, for Future Proof and Super Return. So another jam-packed week the week following. This time of year, next to November, I think is the busiest time of year for conferences.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, I loved Future Proof this year. Obviously, it takes place on the beach, so that's always has a huge draw, and it makes it a really unique conference that you never forget the meetings that you have there and the people you talk to, just because the background is so amazing. Um, Super Return, obviously, very, very high caliber. We actually put on an event while we were there with one of our great clients, Brightwave. So there was a lot going on.
Yeah, the future proof. I was really impressed with because the Miami edition is the new, like their newest one. They've done it in Huntington Beach in September for a few years now. But they had some good reporters that were attending. Poor Ryan Lawler was also at FinTech Meetup, so he had a similar travel schedule to you, Libby. Is what I imagine. So, but I think they had a good lineup of like reporters there as well. And our event with Super Return, with Brightwave at Super Return was amazing, and a beautiful venue, and like I think just like a really great way to like meet different investors and folks that were attending.
Yeah, definitely different audiences for Future Proof and Super Return, but if you can hit that sweet spot of the combined ICP, it's a really good excuse to get out to Miami for the week.
Or just stay here because you're based here like me. Um, and then actually almost immediately following that was like FinTech Americas, which I didn't go to, but I did do some meetings with different people, and went to a couple side events, and they were super valuable. I think like I've seen a lot of folks doing this at like some of the bigger conferences like Money 2020 and FinTech Meetup, where they go and they don't necessarily get a pass, but you can still get a lot of value from like meeting with folks that are there and all in one place. I think especially with conference tickets being so expensive, I think that's something we probably will keep seeing a little bit in the conference circuit.
Why did the Money 2020 folks go out to FinTech Americas?
They were recording podcasts, and I think Scarlett was speaking.
Got it.
Yeah,
I wonder how much is scoping it out.
I don't think I think Money 2020 is still kind of the giant in the space, if you will. So I don't know that they're viewing FinTech Americas as competition just yet.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what Money 2020 in November looks like after another successful year of FinTech Meetup. And I think people deciding they don't want to go to Vegas twice in one year.
I think the
it'll
change.
be.
I think the change in venue for FinTech Meetup going to a different casino will be valuable, because right now it does feel a bit like Groundhog Day because it's similar people, similar vendors, most people who do a booth at one do a booth at the other one, and it does feel just like a little bit like Groundhog Day. So I think moving the other one to at least a different part of the strip will probably be helpful. But you know me, I
Yeah.
don't mind going to Vegas. So
Piggybacking on that, we had some cool press coverage come out from our clients who are at these conferences. So that's like a good double whammy for folks when they're on the ground meeting with reporters to get those headlines coming out as well. But I did just jump ahead.
no, it's okay. I think there are like also a few ways to do it. So and I've kind of done it both ways in the past when I've gone to conferences with clients. We've either done we announce something like the first day of the conference. That's the ideal timeline so that you're not stressed about it all of the days in the conference and you can talk about your news. And then the other flip side is you're announcing something like on stage or some those conversations are seeding for future coverage basically. And I think actually we had examples of both at
Yeah.
FinTech Meetup, like organic conversations that just turned into coverage based on the interviews that we set up, and ones where they had like a planned announcement that went out on day one or day two of the conference.
Yeah, it was great being with Prometeo on the ground when they were able to talk about their big borderless banking announcement. They
Yeah,
got great coverage, American Banker, payments, LATAM list, and goes on. But a lot of that is made even more special in terms of the quotes and the quality of the coverage when your CEO is sitting down like right across from that payments and market reporter, for example.
totally. Or like or they're meeting with a partner in Vegas or wherever one of these conferences are and they can be like, "Oh, did you see our news today?" Or like because folks oftentimes like I'm going into a meeting, I'm like, okay, let me Google this company, make sure I know enough about them. It's I think it's super valuable to be like, oh, we just came out with this news, like, and have something pop up right as you get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then yeah, I mean, I think a few of the other examples like on Brightwave and Extend like were great interviews that happened on the ground and resulted in stories. Like Extends was basically a profile on what they're doing for SMBs news. Super valuable.
Yeah. Want to go to news of the day?
Yeah.
I think the biggest news of the day is today is opening day. Let's go Mets.
I can't believe you're wearing a hat. I wanted to wear sunglasses on my head, but you're wearing a Mets hat. Okay, whatever. That's fine. Um,
Sunglasses and a Mets hat have very different meanings. Mine is more important.
okay, ignoring that. No. But the first thing that we have on here is payments. The payments article about fintech funding hitting an 8-year low. Like, what do you think? Kind of, did you get any feeling, especially coming out of all of this travel recently, like of what clients and folks in the industry like how they're feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this story here is talking about fintech funding hitting a low because VCs are pivoting to AI. I think there really is a very clear sweet spot with AI native fintechs, like Brightwave being a great example of one where you're just running at both paths, and they're have a very significant backing, and they raised $21 million in the last year. So I think there's a sweet spot there, and I think that optimism on the ground is definitely up. Based on the conversations that we were having at FinTech Meetup, I definitely thought after all of the news from last year that it might be a little bit more subdued, but I didn't find that at all.
Yeah, in some of the reporter conversations that I was sitting in on with VCs, the narrative was, and this was like before Klarna announced, it was, is Klarna going to go or not? We were promised all these IPOs, we were promised all these exits. Like the liquidity brings, more investment in the sector, right? So like if they get like fintech investors get some liquidity, ideally they'll start investing in more companies again. And I think when we were there, it was very much like, will Klarna go or will they not? And I think a lot of folks seem pretty optimistic about it and that liquidity would get back to the market and in long term be positive for fintech funding. So like I think we just haven't seen the exit to the M&A or anything like that just yet, and I think that's what a lot of folks are waiting for.
Yeah. I think from an insider perspective, I'm definitely seeing an uptick in M&A, but for many reasons I can't disclose on this podcast right now.
Yeah, that's fair. What about, do you want to talk about the SMB cash flow situation with tariffs? I think that that's an opportunity in the fintech space, and I think a lot of folks that are playing there are already like jumping on it. But what do you think, Libby?
You're the one who wanted to talk about this one. That's all you, girl.
I mean, I just think it's interesting, and I think that there are like some players that already play in this space that are going to do more. And I think there's a huge opportunity from like a messaging perspective of like tariffs, like, oh, you don't have access to cash flow because of tariffs, or tariffs are changing the way that you operate. There's a big opportunity for businesses to like jump in there.
Yeah, but it's already less than half of small businesses have access to working capital or their financial solutions. So with or without the tariffs news, like that already is the reality of it. So it's
Yeah.
we're going to have to see what happens. And there could be a lot of change there, as there already has been. There's just going to continue to be shifts in the news and changes in strategy that we're not always going to be able to anticipate.
Yeah. What about this new media seat in the White House? I know this is Libby's ex, The Hill. So Libby is going to have a good opinion here.
There are differing opinions on this, right? You know, some say that it's, you know, opening the door for the new age of media, which is interesting that people say it's like the new age of media. Like I was head of new media for Sean Patrick Maloney, like 6 years ago. But on the one hand, it's like opening the door for these different channels, different ways to interact with people, different ways to get your message across. Obviously, there's so many newsroom cuts. It's hard to break through in traditional media. Plus, once you break through, you know, how many eyes are you getting on it? At the end of the day, you also need that social media amplification. So what we're seeing here is the White House potentially, you know, opening the door for more of those like influencers, those TikTokers to come and also have access to the White House press room. Now, on the other side of it, the other argument is that the administration is trying to pack the room with friendlies. Pack the room with people who are just going to agree and not ask tricky questions. So I think we're going to have to wait and see. But the second that Dave Portnoy is in the White House briefing room, like I'm going to be tuning in.
I think it's funny because it speaks to something that I feel like I've been having interactions with clients increasingly like over the past 5 years that I've really been in the space. But like I have clients who are regularly like, we want to be in this person's newsletter. It's not just about like the traditional media outlets anymore. Like, great, they want to be in, you know, the Wall Street Journal, obviously, but they're also like, they put equal value on some of these other like fintech newsletters. And I have questions sometimes, and not just fintech, like I think more like specific newsletters. I sometimes have questions about like, what are the journalistic standards and like what does that mean for like how things are going to be covered, because you know reporters at Wall Street Journal are held to specific guidelines and rules and ethics, and a newsletter is a little bit different. Like you can have a little bit more of a lens.
Yeah.
And so I just think it changes the game a little bit and maybe makes it slightly harder for folks to even navigate.
Taylor Lorenz did a really good story about that exact problem. I think almost a year ago. So again, like not so sure how much of a new issue this is or new conversation this is, but
interesting that it's going to be taking place with the White House.
Yeah.
And that's it. In 20 minutes or less, that was Top of Stack. Bye.
Bye.